So, last week I got the request to make a science topic about uh, let's see, toxic chemicals in your beauty products. And so I started doing some research on this, and I went into so many rabbit holes, mainly about skin, which is why I'm gonna get this really bad joke. When I was like a kid in elementary school, he would always say, "Oh, your shoes untied," and you'd look at your shoes and they'd still be tied. But we had just learned I learned what the epidermis was, and the epidermis is your skin. So I'd make this joke and say, "Haha, your epidermis is showing," which is just very lame. But it's funny. Yeah, it's just funny. Anyways, deodorant. So your skin is actually able to absorb so many chemicals through your skin from anything that you apply to it. And this is the same reason why you have coffee patches, or caffeine patches is I guess what they're called. And you have, I think, patches for tobacco users who are trying to quit smoking. And so you have two of those things where scientists have developed this product that you can apply to your skin, which will absorb through it. And so this got people thinking, well, what else can absorb through my skin? Am I putting the makeup on my face, which is now absorbing into my skin? And so there's a big stink a while ago about, the toxic chemicals that are used in beauty products, and a lot of it, when I was doing some research, was about preserving your makeup. Because if you don't add some of these chemicals into your makeup, it'll start to mold and it'll be gross. And there's actually some lawsuits that went through about some green companies that didn't use these chemicals in the product, and there's lawsuits because there's like baby wipes that had mold in them for babies and all that stuff. So I went and searching and found some facts about the epidermis and how things actually go through your skin. And so there's three different ways uh, that chemicals can absorb through your skin. One is intracellular, the other one is transcellular, and then transapophyseal. And so the transapophyseal one is like through hair follicles and sweat glands, which it's not as relevant because you'd have way less transport methods through the transapophyseal than you do the transcellular and the intracellular. So intracellular is actually the main reason why chemicals that are in your beauty products go through, because they're large and they're large, but they're not small enough to go through the cell, which is transcellular, but they're not big enough where they like basically fit in between the cells. So in between the cells in your skin, say I apply lotion, the chemicals in that lotion will go seep through your skin, which is why A, makes your hands be less dry, is because it's moisturizing. And then B, it's able to seep down into your bloodstream. So some of the chemicals that you put on your hand actually gets into your bloodstream. And so there's a big stink about, okay, so if we look at the chemicals in our deodorant and we see these big names like dipropylene glycol, propylene glycol, sodium stearate, polyoxamine 1307, some things like this that just sound scary. Like, I don't know what this is. I'm putting it in my body, like it's getting into my bloodstream. What issues is it going to cause me way down the road? And I found out that the FDA only regulates like 10 of these. Let's see if I have it in my notes. Doesn't look like I put it down, but the FDA compared to the EU is like constantly updating the regulations on beauty products, and so they're regulating like thousands and thousands of different chemicals, and the FDA is only regulating like 10. And that's right off the bat, that's like, okay, something's wrong here. But when I did more research, it's kind of up in the air about what's toxic and what's not, and what's actually affecting you and at what quantities. And so there's some chemicals you obviously want to stay away from, which we'll go into more detail about. But when I was looking, so say for this deodorant that I use, it's just Old Spice Pure Sport. Like the chemicals in it, when I was looking them up, they're really not toxic unless you're ingesting them at high levels. I mean, like we were talking about last week with chlorine absorbs into your skin. Like you can look up different YouTube videos of people putting their hands in water and their hand not in the other glass, and their one hand absorbs all the chlorine out of the water basically. And so it's the same thing happens with other chemicals. Your skin absorbs it, but it's not at such a high concentration that it's actually going to do you damage. And so, sure, well, things like chlorine or like, I don't know, dipropylene glycol, sure, at super high levels, that'll kill you. I mean, you can say the same thing about water. You drink too much water, you'll die. You'll basically drown yourself if you keep drinking too much water, or your bladder will explode. But the ones that the FDA does regulate have much research backed behind it, saying that, okay, this is toxic and it will kill you. And so that's a good thing. And the things that the EU have regulated are a lot of, it's not just, there's just so many chemicals that are being used that studies and research hasn't been done, and they're really at low quantities. That's hard to tell, and it's hard to make science studies that'll go back through and look and say, okay, this chemical does this, and after X amount of years it does this. It's hard to do that for over thousands and thousands of chemicals. I'd have to look more into the process of how they regulate these chemicals, but when I was doing research about some of these, I was finding some pretty surprising results. And so I'm just going to go through a list of chemicals you should definitely stay away from that the FDA does not regulate, which I found surprising. And if you go and look at it, it's really the cheaper beauty products, the ones you get like for $1 or less than that, or like just super cheap stuff. It's like, okay, like they're using cheap materials, they're using like things like aluminum, which is like, I don't know why you would put aluminum in deodorant, but that's heavy metals that you want to stay away from. So really, if you want to stay away from this issue, you're just going to have to up your price a little bit and buy a little bit more expensive items, which are using more quality stuff. Because the more quality chemicals that you use in things like deodorant, A, the better it smells, the B, the better it feels. So you know you're buying something cheap if you say you put it under your arm and then you get a rash. Like, obviously there's something in that that's not good. So I think kind of what the FDA's thought process is they're expecting the consumers to do their own research. So thankfully I've done a little bit of research for you. I can go over some chemicals that you can look at your beauty products or your deodorant and see, okay, this is in here. This is probably pretty harmful. Let me see if I can get something else. So the first one is called DEA, or diethanolamine. And the FDA even says on their website that this has been linked to cancer in animal studies. So the fact that they don't regulate this is pretty insane. Because if it's like, there's been studies that have linked this to cancer in animals, I don't understand why it wouldn't be linked to cancer in humans. And I don't know if the studies just haven't gone on long enough. I'd pull up the website, but I don't want to bore you guys too much. And so don't buy anything that has DEA in the ingredients list, because there's so many different variants of this. It'll be like DEA, ISO, whatever chemicals. So just make sure you stay away from those kind of chemicals. And then aluminum was the other one that really stood out to me as a metal that you just, I don't know why you would want aluminum in any of your products, but it's another one that's like, it's obviously linked to some issues when it gets into your bloodstream and can cause some imbalances in your blood. So it's just some things to think about, and I hope that really helped, and I hope you just become a little more cognizant of what's in your beauty products and what's in your deodorant, so that when you go to purchase your new products, you can look at it and have some red flags stand out. And so this isn't really super in-depth of science, but more of a PSA to say that the FDA isn't regulating a lot of these chemicals, and it's kind of up to you to do the research on what you're using. Because there's thousands, like I said, thousands and thousands of chemicals that the EU is regulating, and the FDA isn't. So it's really up to you to go through and look and do your own research about what chemicals are bad and what chemicals aren't, and make your own decision. Because a lot of it's not heavily researched. It's not a hot topic really. And so it's really up to you. I looked through the stuff that's in my Old Spice deodorant, and none of it like really stood out to me. I was like, wow, I'm putting that on my skin. That's getting in my blood. So make sure you do your own research. Make sure you're looking at what you're doing. All right. Sounds good. Let's get into some Rocket League.